Happen if Texas seceded. So Texas says, I give up. Okay? Which means the United States would only have 505 electoral votes. Because Texas secedes, also the United States would declare war on Texas. Well, considering that our society is hyper-partisanized, well, Florida would probably secede shortly after, followed by Utah, Idaho, and Oklahoma. And of course Alaska, because Alaska is Alaska. And then a lot of these your typical Republican states, not Illinois, will secede from the United States. All of these states will probably secede, only giving America 311 electoral votes. And then a civil war would start between liberals and conservatives. But I think the most likely thing is going to happen is going to be and likely states like Wisconsin, Maine, and Pennsylvania would leave as well. No, likely Wisconsin and Pennsylvania would probably leave as well, and Arizona. Whereas with Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona likely leave as well. Well, alongside for some reason New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, leaving the American map looking like this. Well, the Republicans would probably easily capture all of these landlocked states, except for Georgia and Michigan. Colorado. Colorado has some mountains, so it would be very hard to take that. Democrats would easily just recapture New Hampshire. And yeah, Maine also has a Republican legislature as well, but they decided because of Governor Whitmer, basically. Georgia, there was some holdout. Basically, yeah, the whole state rebels except for Atlanta, which is easily taken. Nevada is taken because really nobody lives there, and all I have to do is take Las Vegas. They push back and reclaim Pennsylvania. The United States government also reclaims West Virginia from the area. Yeah. Colorado also is captured. The push here for Ohio is captured. Third. Meanwhile, the push for Oregon, Washington, the majority of forces push on Washington, Oregon, and California. Yeah. Meanwhile, the northern states use a southern strategy and recapture Louisiana, making a blockade of the Republican states. The American government basically says, do not recognize the Republican-led government, and does a similar tactic to the Civil War. Even then, it's a much different world than it is now. Countries like Russia, Syria, and other countries, and a couple of other countries dare to recognize the Republican-led government as a legitimate government, and basically start supporting it, including countries like China and Russia, knowing that this would basically, supporting the other side, basically saying, you know what, let's intervene as well. Canada also declares war on the Republican-led government as well, which means there is also a war against Canada. Canadian troops occupy North Dakota and Montana, basically, as well. Oregon is finally occupied by the Republican government, spraying off California and Washington. USA calls all of NATO to help, which is pretty bad news for the Republican government. Mississippi is also recaptured. Meanwhile, the Republicans recapture Michigan as well, and Ohio again. This has been 2 years since the war has started, and this is what the map looks like. Canadian troops continue moving down throughout the unpopulated northern part of the country. But a defensive line is made at the Rockies as well, and but again, they're going to have to worry about the flat terrain of the Midwest, which is going to be a real hard thing. They recapture Mississippi and Louisiana, and they recapture West Virginia. They capture the USA puts all the troops on protecting Virginia and Maryland, because they know if DC falls, the country falls as well. They push through Pennsylvania again, and New York, with this part of New York and Pennsylvania outcaptured, along with a small part of Maryland. So we continue. Canada takes over Alaska, which everybody forgot Alaska was part of the United States until now. The Republican-led government retakes North Dakota and South Dakota, as there were very little Canadian troops there. Some troops from Europe also come as well. But now they also occupy Idaho and Oregon again, and Nevada, which create another defensive line. But the Republican resistance government recaptures Wyoming. The big battle is for Washington, D.C. Virginia is on every attack. And the governor of Virginia fled to West Virginia, basically because he was a Republican, Governor Youngkin. And he basically just states as a coup in Virginia, retaking Virginia. Now the battle for D.C. begins. Montana and Idaho are recaptured again, and Nevada as well, and Oregon. The Democrat government collapses over here as they run out of food. The food crisis basically collapses these states over here. Meanwhile, Canada continues to occupy Alaska. DC and Maryland are captured. The American government collapses. The Democrat-led American government collapses. What is now formed the new government of America? Well, basically, the government basically forms a new government body. And basically, in liberal-led states, the conservative government basically says, you know what, let's bring back religion in conservative states. Let's ban all the weird stuff that ruined liberal states to begin with. I'm looking at you, California. And also, let's just give California its independence. We don't want to deal with California. I think everybody can agree that in America without California is better. So, yeah. California is no longer part of America. And Hawaii finally gets its independence after America basically just took it over all those years ago. So that means we'll have America without Hawaii and California. Yeah. So that means what that would happen if Texas seceded and started a civil war. And also basically because they just retook America again, and basically just got rid of the government in Washington, D.C., which was already unstable as it is. Basically, yeah, the California and Hawaii are kicked out. The rest of the states are basically doing stuff, including with getting rid of illegal immigration altogether, as well. Again, a lot of people from these states probably fled towards Mexico and Canada, which means Mexico and Canada gained an extra millions of people that fled from America, mostly from the war in the states. So that means Canada gets a couple million more people, and Mexico gets a couple million more people. But again, most of these people are eventually resettled and came back to America. But a lot of the more Hispanic people and some more Asian populations just move back to the country because they don't want to move back to America for some reason, and let's go back to the countries. But of course, a lot of people stay, and basically like the Italians in the 1920s, they simply assimilate and become a part of American society, as well. So a lot of the immigrants remain, but some do leave for their own countries or Canada. Yeah, some do go to Canada. We don't want Canada to be left out. But basically, California is no longer part of America anymore. Which I think most people will probably be glad that California and the elites are no longer part of America. And Hawaii also, which never made sense why Hawaii was a state to begin with and sort of been its own country. Also, Hawaii and Puerto Rico are independent countries. Alongside but all the other territories can't really become their own countries because they're not really eligible enough. They still need to be dependent on America to survive. Also, American Samoa just joins the country of Samoa, so that's the only territory that actually has a change in anything. And China occupies Guam and Northern Mariana Islands as well. And the Virgin Islands, that's, still is part of America. But basically, China just gives back Guam and Northern Mariana Islands to the United States. 20 years later, California basically collapses as a country and has to rejoin America as well. Because, yeah, California still wouldn't be able to run on its own, given the sorry state that the state is already in. And like with all the other blue states, the state had to have some major cleanup as well. Basically means California will not be able to conduct its own elections until basically all the corruption is cleaned out. So, which would be a similar thing that happened in Illinois, New York, and Georgia as well. Which means all the corruption in the government is cleaned out, and America is now one of the least corrupt countries in the world as well. And also, big business is not able to donate anymore. All the government monopolies are broken up. Companies like Disney, and yeah, wokeness is gone altogether. But is a civil war likely to happen? Well, similar things happened in the 1920s. If you really don't realize this. America goes through these cycles every 40 or 60 years, where they have hyper-polarization and basically people hating each other. And this happens every 40 years. This happened during the Jimmy Carter era. This happened, of course, in the 1920s, the quote-unquote Roaring 20s, and of course the 80s, and of course the time before the Civil War. But yeah. So, yeah, basically, because if you really want to talk about the government, it's not being good, we can talk about the British government as well. Being a bunch of, pansies as well. So, yeah. And the Canadian government, yeah, they're even worse than the American and British government combined. And of course, let's forget all the countries in Europe where the governments get nothing done. So that's basically about this video. Goodbye.